Hello and welcome to Working on It Real Talk for Modern Men. I'm your host, Anthony Ball, and this is a space for guys who are doing the work. Maybe you're stuck in a 9 to 5 that doesn't light you up, doesn't put that fire up your ass. Maybe you're questioning the version of masculinity you grew up with, or maybe you're just tired of feeling that you've got to have it all figured out. Each week, I share real conversations, solo and with guests, on holistic health, men's work, emotional depth, breath, burnout, purpose, relationships, and the messy, beautiful process of becoming who you really are. Just honest talk for men who are working on it. Glad you're here. Let's drop in. So, today's podcast is on the topic of taking full responsibility. And the reason why I've chosen this is because I feel like it's one of the most important areas for a man to really step into, and where I see a lot of men avoiding. They're not really stepping into life, and they're avoiding life by not taking that full responsibility. So I wanted to discuss that and just take it into more depth and my idea around it and the approaches I took and what can help other men and potentially help you to really step into those areas in much greater depth. So I want to just talk about why it's important to begin with, why I found it to be one of the more important um, topics to discuss and share and to help other men to grow and to evolve. For me, how it changed my life. When I reflect back to how I was, especially in my early 20s and mid 20s, I was a very passive man. I was jumping from job to job, only lasting really maybe 1, 2 years, and then I'd want to do something else. I was very numb. I was very disconnected from my emotions, very disconnected from community. And I was just kind of flowing through life. I was just plodding along. So, and then certain things happened within my life that caused me um, to reflect and look at myself at a much deeper level. And when this happened, found all the areas of my life start to develop, start to grow. And this is in my personal relationships, within my work, my purpose, within my finances, within my health. I saw all of those areas grow to such extent by just me taking that full responsibility. So I wanted to, and this is why I want to share it with other men, is just let men know it's tough, but the steps that you need to take to make it happen are relatively easy. You just have to have that awareness and that drive to really step into that area. And I've already just said it, right? Your life will change if your focus is taking full responsibility every aspect that you step into. Your life will change. You'll notice it in all different ways, and that will be from the people you hang out with. There might be relationships that die off. There might be relationships that evolve. As people change, relationships can change, and that might mean that some relationships need to die. Some relationships evolve and they grow together. And you'll no longer become a victim. A lot of people and a lot of men have this kind of like victim mentality. They're consumed by the news, they're consumed by hurt, and they just live in that past. Lose all the distractions and focus on the inner self, the personal self, to really make those changes. So, what does it mean to take full responsibility? Well, for me, and this is probably where the clarity comes from and taking full responsibility, it's taking full responsibility from your inner experience, your inner world. And when you start to take your full responsibility from the internal, the external will change. You haven't got to take responsibility for someone else's actions. How they act is on them. But you can own and take ownership of how you are responding to that. Sometimes, especially if you're not really if you're quite early on in the stage of like self development and looking into the emotions in particular, because I remember when I was starting to connect with my emotions again, there was a lot of uncomfortability, a lot of disconnect, um, many panic attacks, and it's hard. But going through that uh, uncomfortability part, you'll see the other side, and you'll thank yourself later. It's putting the hard steps in now, so that the steps are easier later in your life. You'll be grateful for it. So that's what I mean by taking full responsibility, just owning your own inner experience. Now, what areas? I want to just kind of simplify it as much as possible here, because I can talk and talk and talk on this topic, and you can take it to any level that you want to take it to. But I want to just focus on four kind of pillars, and those four pillars are finances, relationships, purpose, and health. Now let's start with finances. And again, the reason I picked these four areas is because as a man, as a masculine man, it's very important that you step into these areas. Right? There's a lot of if you're in a relationship with a feminine female, right? They're going to want you to step into these areas. They're going to want you to lead, and I'll talk about masculinity a little bit later on. But they're going to want you to lead in the relationship. So with finances, where can you take ownership in your finances? And you can reflect on this as I talk. But like, if you're in a couple, are you managing the finances? Are you looking at the income? Are you looking at the expenditure? Are you looking at investments that you can make for the future? If you're going to build a family, it's going to be very important to do that. Like, what can you leave behind? What legacy can you leave it behind for your children? And if you're kind of living paycheck to paycheck, then you need to take more responsibility in this area, because it doesn't have to happen. You need to manage the finances at a much better extent. Find ways where you can reduce your outgoings. And if you're consuming, if you're just buying because you're kind of just disconnected from life or just uncomfortable with the life you're in, you're trying just buying things just for the sake of buying things, then stop. Just stop buying things and look at ways that you can build for a better future, an actual future that you're excited about and want to expand into, want to like dive into, and again, like puts that fire up your ass. Okay, so the next one, relationships. So relationships are in all areas, right? So you've got your family relationships, you've got your friendships, you've got your romantic, you've got your work. And so how are you showing up in these relationships? Is there some relationships where you're just kind of ticking along? You're just kind of like, oh, you're there, but you're not really present. You're just kind of like saying hello and giving the pleasantries. Does that light you up, or are you just bored? Right? And just remember, boredom is just a form of anger, a low level form of anger, because you're disappointed and potentially a boundary's been crossed within yourself. Like internally, your soul has just been let down by whatever the conversation is going through. I get that when anyone talks about politics or the news. So within the relationships, so how can you take full more responsibility in these areas with regards to, and some areas of discussion are around the communication. How can you communicate better? What books can you read? What workshops can you go to? What retreats can you go to? And how can you just learn to be present within a conversation itself? And that's probably one of the biggest ones for me, is staying present. I find myself, especially when I'm busy at work, or I've got something else to do and I'm in a conversation, I just find my mind is very distracted and I'm not present with the person. And I'm very disconnected. I'm not really getting anything from the conversation because I'm distracted. And that, and for me, how I've worked on that and how I'm still working on that, is um, through meditation, through breath work. They were great techniques for me. And having that awareness, having like a practice in the morning and throughout the day of how can I be present? And when I'm in a conversation, I find myself getting distracted and I'm aware of myself getting distracted. Okay, why am I distracted? What questions can I ask? Where do I want to lead this conversation? And what else within relationships? Well, if you go into the way you're acting from, let's say, where do you hang out? Are you just going to a local bar or a pub? And again, it's not really fulfilling for you. Well, how can you change that? How can you take the lead in that area, taking that full responsibility of how your relationships are, rather than just like ticking along or blaming the other person? How do you want it to be? Again, as that masculine man, take the lead, take that full responsibility into those relationships, all the relationships, and make it what you want to make it. Make it fulfilling. That is obviously easier said than done. And again, I'm still going through the motions with that. But the more I put my awareness to it, the more I put my attention to it, that's when I'm seeing changes. You know, I've had relationships um, where we were great friends, talking a lot, and then numerous years it just went like the kind of the fire in that relationship just was dying out. It was dimming, and I had a lot of sadness and grief around that, thinking, well, that's the end of it. But and sometimes that is the case. But what I've found is that both parties want to connect. And it's like, well, how do we want to connect? When there's a disconnect, each individual can be telling their own little story, which can bring more disconnect. And you just have to recognize the story that you're telling yourself. And is it true? And when I did that, there's been 3 or 4 very good friendships that I can reflect on now where it's changed and it's had a positive effect. And then you look into, let's say, romantic relationships and around sex in particular and how you connect, right? So let's say your sex life is poor, right? Because if it's doing well, then it doesn't maybe need that much attention because you've already placed your awareness there quite well. But also there might be further growth there. You just have to really consider that for yourself because each one has their own perspective. But within sex, if it's poor at the moment, well, how can you take responsibility in that area of your life, of your romantic life? Again, leading from that masculine point of view, how can you lead? What topics can you discuss? What conversations can you have with your partner? How open are you around your sexuality? How open are you to exploring? This is again questions you can ask your partner. What workshops can you go to? What therapists can you go see? Right, and again, not going down the victim route, the blaming route, taking that responsibility for yourself and leading it. And when you do this, you'll see and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but you'll see the polarity change within that dynamic. Next one, purpose. Now purpose is a big one. Everyone's like, well, what is purpose? What does purpose look like? What does it feel like? So many people are like, well, how do you know you're on your purpose? For me, it's different for everybody, right? And this is what you need to figure out. But for me, how it worked, and I believe I'm on my purpose right now. And my purpose is simple. It's not exactly about what I'm doing. It's more like how the feeling is. And I know my purpose comes from serving in an area that I think is beneficial to humanity. And right now, and for a great number of years so far, it's been around breath work and men's work. And that's been my purpose driven area. And it brings me so much fulfillment. And when I stepped into this area, and like I said at the start of this podcast, I was jumping around thinking that there was something else out there, not really settled. I was looking for external things to fulfill me. And external, I mean like house, car, objects, distracting with watching football, going on nights out, drinking alcohol, many different aspects just to distract, to find that fulfillment. But when I stepped in and really started to work on myself, started to think maybe there's something else out there. I joined a men's group. That was one of the best things I did, was join a men's group. I found a community of people, of men who wanted to develop, and they're at a much higher, I don't want to say higher standard, but they were on the same path. That's probably the better way to say it. They were on the same path, and we grew together. And since I've done that, like the men I've been surrounded by are just incredible men, and they've really challenged me to grow and challenged me to step into leadership at a much greater depth. And I've seen so many things change in my life, from my relationships, from my financial state, from my purpose work. I'm just every day I'm just stepping more and more into that, and I get more and more fulfilled. There's nothing else that matters. So see where you are, where you stand in this area. Like the work that you're in, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to quit work, but how can you make it more purposeful? How can you make those connections at work more purposeful? How can you make the things that you do, the tasks that you do, more purposeful? Where will you get fulfilled? Really reflect on that. Like, where will you find fulfillment? And then in health, health will become more in the topics of like nutrition and physical workouts, um, looking after the body from a nurturing point of view as well. So if we look at nutrition, what are we putting into our bodies? Because what you're putting into your bodies is going to have so much effect on you. If you're eating junk, like sweets, processed, heavy, highly processed foods, alcohol, things that don't make you feel great. They might feel good in the moment, but there's a hangover afterwards that the body's and the soul is dying, and it's slowly killing you. And that kind of comes under the aspect of like the death urge, which is another topic on its own. But if you want to just research death urge, it's quite interesting how we as humanity are like craving death, and we find ways to slowly kill ourselves. And then the physical part, are you going to the gym? Are you working out? And it doesn't mean just like lifting weights. It means like taking care of the body in a very healthy way. How are you lifting the weights? If you're going gym and you're getting injured all the time, you're not looking after yourself. You're probably pushing your body too hard, and you need to find another nurturing way to manage that. And you might need to go to a PT or a physiotherapist to help with that. And that would be the way you're taking full responsibility and not just doing the same pattern over and over again. That's not taking full responsibility. That's more of a childish response. You're not learning from that experience, kind of waiting for mummy and daddy to tell you what to do. It's like, no, you have to be the one to make that decision. Like, you're the adult now, you're the man, you're the one leading. So you need to step into making those decisions. And again, if you haven't got a community of men, like I spoke about before, like join a men's group, find one around you. If you haven't got a physical one around you, there's online ones. Like I run in person here in Bali and I run online, and they're amazing. Like I cannot recommend them enough. So that's a health part. Right. So last topic I want to touch on today is around masculinity and taking full responsibility and how it improves relationships in particular. Right. So let's talk about masculine and feminine to begin with, just so we're clear on that, because maybe not so, maybe you are, maybe not, and I'll just clarify where I'm at with that. So, masculine and feminine masculine isn't just men, and feminine isn't just women, right? The masculine and feminine is within all of us. Some of us have a high percentage of masculine, and some of us have a higher percentage of feminine, and vice versa. On the other, like a lower percentage of masculine and a lower percentage of feminine. Typically, men have a higher percentage of masculinity, and typically they're very disconnected from the feminine within them, or they're just not aware of what it is because they haven't been taught that from for many different reasons. And typically, females have a lot more feminine. So that's the general how it is right now. But again, it can go the other way, where the feminine is higher in a man, and a masculine is higher in a female. Right, but I want to touch on the first one. So men with high masculinity. Right, we're going to focus on that energy right now. So, and this is where if you're in a relationship and you're the masculine, you're with a partner who's a feminine. As a masculine, it is your responsibility to step into masculinity, step into leading, taking full responsibility into these areas. And if you haven't, if you've stepped back and you're just plodding along, not really taking life by the reins and riding it, and you have that life, you wake up and you're excited for what you do. Not you haven't got to be excited, you haven't got to be motivated all the time because motivation is dwindling and it comes and goes. But you have that determination to follow through and stick through with it. But you can feel that fire is there. It's just maybe some days you feel more crap than others, and that's all right. But you have that determination to push through that resistance. And when you're stepping into this area, and if you're not stepping into this area, sorry, what you'll find is that your partner, who is naturally more feminine, will have to step into the masculine. They'll have to step into it because you're not stepping into it. They've lost trust in you stepping into that masculine role. And when this happens, the polarity will become more neutral. And you won't have that chemistry. You will lose that chemistry. And more than likely or not, your sex life will start to reduce. The attraction for each other will start to reduce. The feminine wants to be led by the masculine. And that's the masculine and feminine within you and from your romantic partner. They want to be led. They will lean in. And that doesn't mean led in the sense of domination, although, some people might like that. But it's led from a place of, this is the direction I want to take us. What are your thoughts on that? What do you see a different way that we can approach it? Or do you see a different path? But that's you leading that. And that's whether it's, again, within your sex life, within your finances, within the direction of your relationship, with the house that you're creating, with the family that you're creating, the purchases that you're making, right? All those areas, just step into them and take the lead. Take the lead so the female or your feminine partner, let's focus on feminine partner, can just surrender to being the feminine. And then that allows them to bring all the things that come with the feminine. They can really step into that nurturing, caring aspect of ourselves. Right. So I want to share some book recommendations here that will help with learning more, discovering more about taking full responsibility, and also understanding masculinity as well. So the first book that I'd recommend is From the Core, A New Masculine Paradigm. All right, and this is by John Wayland. Great book. It talks about full responsibility. And it kind of links well with the next book that I'm going to recommend, and that is The Way of the Superior Man. It talks to great extent, and I had to read this book so many times, especially when I was first getting into men's work and masculinity and feminine energy. But it really changed my perspective and changed how I showed up. But The Way of Superior Man by David Data talks a lot about masculinity and feminine polarity. But yeah, I'm still reading it, and I'm still I listen to it on an audio. And every time I'm hearing something new that I just missed last time. There's so many nuggets of wisdom within that book. So we'll keep it on those two books. I have so many books I want to recommend for men's work in particular, but I'll share more in other podcasts itself. So, kind of closing thoughts on this topic. So just a summary, I guess, of like what is it to take full responsibility. So just a reminder, taking that full responsibility is owning your own inner experience, and how can you show up and lead in a much greater extent in these areas and in those pillars, right, that we spoke about. So those 4 pillars: finance, relationship, purpose, and health. Masculinity, right? Really step in, especially within your romantic relationships. Step into leading in all areas of the relationship with openness with your partner. But just allow yourself to lead, allow the feminine to lean into your leadership. And you'll see such great changes within your life. You'll see the polarity change. If your sex life is poor, you'll see that change so much. I cannot emphasize that enough. Like, there's so many benefits from taking that responsibility, taking that ownership for how and what you're going through. Where you are right now in life, maybe it's not great. Well, take responsibility where you're at and start making the changes today. And this is the question for the listener. So, what accountability will you do to work on this? And I want you to let me know in the comment section, or send me an email. You can send me an email at info@letsgetlostbarley.com. And you can also follow me on Instagram at workingonit.menspodcast. And you can leave me any comments, and you can send me a DM. If you have any questions for my next podcast, or maybe there's a certain topic you'd like to discuss, send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.